Welcome back, everyone, to the next episode of MyCast. In this episode of Beyond the Boardroom, we have with us someone who hails from the analytics industry. Currently working with Nielsen, Mr. Vijay Udasi is the analytics leader for India and Indonesia, and also the route to market leader for the Asia Pacific region. Welcome, Vijay sir. It's an honor to have you as our guest today.
Good evening. Thank you for having me in.
We're so excited to have you here. We did a bit of this talking end from our side, and we were seeing that you're a graduate in physics, and then later on, you've had your career all in analytics. How did you develop an interest in analytics? And so, what are some of the changes that you have happened in this industry from the time that when you started out to now? How has this journey panned out so far?
Oh, very interesting question, right? So, again, analytics lays on the foundations of statistics and math, right? Without which it's so difficult to do any of that analytics, which is where I think it's a natural progression, right? Having graduated with honors in physics, I did my MBA, right? And then moved into the area of research first before coming into analytics. Way back, I joined a research company called as ORG Mag, again, which is now today called as Nielsen, through various subsequent mergers and acquisitions. So I spent close to 10 to 14 years in research, looking at various syndicated research and custom research, looking at trends, looking at what consumers are buying, what consumers are watching, and more important, how does it help our friends within the retailer industry as well as from an FMCG angle, right? Looking at a clear trends in terms of what's happening on the pricing, how can the pricing be improved, what could happen in terms of the promotions, how consumers shopping to that extent, right? What is it they do within a store, what's influencing them very. So that has always been a keen area for me, and all of that required analysis at a point of time, and it involved interpretation at a point of time. Having done all of that, it was a but natural progression onto the analytics side, because that's where you could do far more sharp shooting insights onto clearly what the clients need, and from a future perspective, moving in very clearly from just trying to address what is happening to why is it happening and what you can do as a result of that. I think that's where the difference lies, right? From a research angle, typically you try and end up at what has happened, why is it happening, but it seldom moves into the area of predictive, where you can simulate what will happen as a result of what you do, and more important, also from an angle of one single thing, which I would call as prescriptive, right? Helping clients clearly understand what should I do as a result of all this. I think this is the area which got me intrigued in the area of analytics, and that's why I'm in this domain today.
That's a great journey to have, and also how you talked about the prescriptive part of data analytics. So now we'll move to like the other side of the data industry. So we see that the debate around data privacy has gained a lot of traction now. We would like to know how has the analytics industry been affected by this, and we have seen that there has been a lot of talk amongst the millennials and the Gen Z about data privacy after documentaries like Social Dilemma or The Great have come into the common folklore. So where do you see the data privacy part heading from here?
So if you were to look at it very clearly, right, the analytics industry obviously and the data scientists, right, around the world had to reset some of the things with the evolution of the privacy laws, right? Particularly in Europe and the US and some of other markets. Obviously, there are challenges, but at the same point of time, the industry is also innovating, right? All that is required for a couple of things. First, ensuring that we are making data both protected as well as accessible, for when lawful disclosure is required. Also, creating ways of data sharing and processing that, not only to preserve privacy but also allowing retracting information if the need arise. Third is, of course, learning to work with limited data where its usage is restricted or regulated by law. But most important, right, one of the challenges which the data scientist and analytics is also trying to work around is for projects which are intended cross regional or multiple markets, trying to live with providing compliance with various regional laws, because Europe has, of course, one set of
Yeah,
rules,
the
which is
GDPR rules.
GDPR,
Yeah.
but other markets have different law, right? So if you're working across multiple countries, I think the biggest challenge there is how do you now factor in various regional laws regarding data privacy and security and work around on that. Now, some of the methods, and obviously this is here to stay, right? This is not going to go away. Given that, what is it that data analysts and we at Nielsen, what is it that we are trying to do? I think it's a fundamental shift in the mindset also to protect the privacy laws, and as well as the same point of time being in compliance. So the first thing which we are trying to do is think very, very differently. And it's a fundamental shift, let me put it that way. It's about having privacy built in as a design in whatever you do rather than think of it later. If you think of it and build it in the design aspect itself, you're far more safer, so that whatever you do, you are keeping privacy in mind. Second is collecting what is required at a bare minimum for a project. You don't have to collect every single piece of information, right? Third is restricted usage and sharing for the intended usage and with limited extracts. The fourth important element there, I would say, is data anonymization. One of the direct requirements of the GDPR and many other regional regulations is focus on de-identification of the data which you're collecting, right? And how do you divorce the information from the real people? Because otherwise it reveals the identity of the person and it's PII, and one could land in a lot of trouble with the compliance law. And hence, one of the ways to achieve that is by data anonymization, right? So that's what everybody is working on. It's an important element of the journey of analytics. And the fifth part is data generalization, which is essentially it's a method of again de-identification by taking specific attributes such as numerical or geographic values or location, and then changing into broader geographical context or categories. Example, clustering people, let's say in a particular age group, and then you generalize it by merging two age groups and locations to a larger areas. So for example, from a lat long to a broader area of, let's say, 1 square kilometer to 5 square kilometers to a pin code or a ward. That way it protects a lot more confidentiality of the people, and thus you're restricting the privy laws. And finally, and the last is focusing a lot more on data encryption, right? I think these are the important things. But most important fundamental shift for everybody in analytics is to start thinking of privacy at the start of it, built in from a design angle, rather than think of it at a later date once you've collected the information. So if you start at the beginning, build it as a design, that's the way I would recommend to take care of the privacy laws.
That's a great way to say it, sir. And also because, as Piyush mentioned, there's so much talk about, lack of laws pertaining to the privacy level. We really need to do something about it. And that's a great way that you've expressed it. So, sir, one thing that I was really curious about is, we studied it in our course, and I'm pretty sure that the other students are also looking into this. There's a lot of talk about the qualitative research part and the quantitative research part. So, in the qualitative aspect, ethnography and other qualitative techniques that we were using earlier weren't really feasible during the COVID times. And all the eyes were focused on the analytics when it used to come to decision making. So the phrase data is the new oil also seems, all the more relevant at this moment. How has this evolution and change in analytics opened up all the more new avenues for this sector?
So, couple of things, right? I think the industry itself evolved. If I were to just put it in a very simple way, just to give from a angle of a quant or a qual. So, when face-to-face interviews could not happen, it moved to an online and telephonic interview. Qual actually moved from again face-to-face group discussions, ethnography, to video group discussions, which are moderated extremely well. So the industry itself has changed. Now, at the same point of time during this period, from an analytical standpoint, because you needed information for decision making, and I would say decision making of two kinds: loss prevention and opportunity identification. These are two distinct parts, but became very, very important. Especially in the COVID period, it moved towards understanding where there are potential issues with supply chain. How
Hmm.
do you minimize out of stock to that extent, right? uh, because of the lockdown, that's what really happened. So clearly looking at areas around, what should we do to minimize out of stocks. Second was in the area of, since retail trade itself was getting limited supply, the retailers were
Yeah.
focusing on limited assortment to that extent. The question and the analytics revolved around redefining the assortment ladder for manufacturers. and so that they could find the right opportunities, what to place within a store, what is it that the consumers are buying, are they still focusing on bigger brands, are they focusing on regional brands, where is the trust element to that extent at this point of time, which consumers are ready to buy, what are they upgrading and what are they downtrading to that extent. That became very, very important. The third element was, addressing new consumer needs, because at that point of time also the needs of the consumers and the shoppers changed. What were they liking, what were they stopping, what would they buy differently, where would they buy it, and then how do you meet them, and making it fast and agile, were they focus on analytics. Last was the final adjustments around promotions, right? Would they make a significant impact at this point of time, would it not make a significant impact at this point of time, especially for brands which are not very well known, because in the lockdown period all of us are aware that some of the brands which we wanted were not available in the stores. We all have seen that. But at the same point of time, a lot of local players and manufacturers were available.
Yeah.
Now, how do you entice the consumers? How do you ensure that once a product comes into home, how do you keep on bringing the loyalty
Hmm.
back, and how do you get the
Yeah.
consumers to come back and try the same product again? Right now, that also has the change in the minds of consumers from a preference of buying a particular product. And then because of this change and shift, the analytics had to focus on how to get the loyalty back in the minds of consumers, and would promotions play a play for the players who lost out at this point of time. And that, I think, those were the key aspects completely coming in at this point of time, is what I would say.
So, sir, do you think the promotions did make a play? Did they actually make an impact in bringing back the consumers and gaining the loyalty?
Post lockdown, certain aspects we have already seen that. Overall, the
Yeah.
level of promotion certainly has come down,
Yeah.
right? There is no doubt. The data itself shows that. But in certain cases, we are really, really seeing that now that in certain categories there has been an ample supply, it's back on it. Manufacturers are looking at promotions to get consumers back to come back to their original choices.
So I like we like the various
Yeah.
examples you gave about the retail industry, and we know Nielsen is also involved in the FMCG and the media industry as well. So in a similar context, what were some of the key insights that you saw while working with these industries, and what are some of the big trends that you can see coming?
Great question, right? So from a FMCG and retail, we see three key things. The first one is what I would call as a rational reset. Consumers have
Hmm.
prioritized and will continue to prioritize. What we clearly saw and continue to see is staples having a big uptick because of being at home. Same is the case we see with the home and hygiene products as well as nutraceuticals, um, over the counter products for health, which have found a new place at consumers' home. Now, these trends will stay for a while. On the other hand, out of home consumption categories clearly see a decline. Now, this will change as the lockdowns get over, as the concerns get over, and then you would start seeing them coming. But clearly, a rational reset is there, and consumers will have learned to prioritize, and they will continue to do for a
Yeah.
while. The second trend which we see is affordability reset, because obviously if you were to look at India, clearly we have consumers at various spectrums of affordability, right? So on one hand there is the refocus on the large family value packs, and on the other hand, where there's an issue on affordability, there is also we're seeing downgrading to low unit packs, as well as we also see downgrading from branded to unbranded products to that extent. We have seen that happening. The third is a channel reset itself. Given the challenges around accessibility and
Hmm.
concerns around social distancing, we clearly see modern trade sales have dipped. I mean, let's look at you and me as consumers, and let's try and recollect the last time you and I went to a big supermarket or a hypermarket, right, during the lockdown period. We all, as shoppers, returned to the neighborhood convenience stores. That's one thing which happened. The second was, of course,
Yeah.
earlier we would go to e-commerce for smartphones and fashions. But during lockdown, even that changed for an FMCG angle. So clearly, we could see e-commerce became a clear winner for FMCG as far as the large metros are concerned. Right. So these are the three things which I see from an FMCG retail perspective. Now, from a future trend point, from an FMCG, we expect the growth for this year at least to be flat to 1% from a full year perspective, right? Mind you, H1, the first half of the year was actually a negative 6. That's the consumption going down, which means from a full year perspective, if you are focusing
Yeah.
to be a plus one, which means H2 has to grow at
Hmm.
plus 6% for it to be flat. Now, obviously, with the festive season around the corner, we do see consumer coming back and buying things. That's a clear indication of trends which you're already seeing. Now, that's as far as the FMCG retail is concerned. You asked the other thing from a media perspective, right? What happened from a media side? They too, I would say, while several things have happened, I would have want to highlight three key things. First is decline in print readership. I think that has been um, a sad collateral damage because of the COVID. A clear decline in print readerships, which continues even today. The second is the average time spent watching TV has actually gone up from an average of 3 minutes 46, yeah, 3 hours 46 minutes pre-COVID to about 4 hours 48 minutes during the peak COVID time. But now it's back to the levels of 4 minute 9 minutes. But clearly, you also see an increase in the media consumption via TV, right? Even from a 3 hours 46 minutes to a 4 hour 9 minutes. So that is a change which has happened. The third, I would say, is the time spent on video streaming. I mean, that's not new to all of you, right? Video streaming clearly has seen a big benefit. We have clearly seen it moving from 3 hours 34 minutes to about 4 hours 8 minutes, and back to 3 hours 50 minutes currently. Clearly, the OTT channels have benefited with both the original content as well as syndicated shows, right? These are the three things which we see, which has happened as a result of the changes which we are seeing in the current scenario.
So that was a great way to express it, and that's a really good way of how we could understand it. So there's one thing more that was actually, I was recently reading it in the papers that Nielsen announced that they're going to measure YouTube connected TV, the CTV ads, as digital viewing is also increased. Now, I know that this is something that's currently happening in the UK and USA. So, sir, could you tell me something that how streaming behavior has changed post COVID and what does it mean for Nielsen in specific?
It's a very good question given the current scenario, right? So let me just address CTV right now, and then I'll also talk a little bit more about what's happening as far as the streaming behavior. Overall, if you were to look at, right, the media consumption on digital and digitally connected devices has actually increased. At this stage, there are limited number of connected TVs in a market like India, on which media is happening, and hence US and UK are the first markets where we announce our partnership for measuring ads on the YouTube connected TVs. Having said that, we are actually seeing a definite move and push for players like Airtel and Geo getting aggressive to push the smart TV step set-top box in the market, and hence in a couple of years from now, we would see some scale which would enable us to open measurements of connected TVs in India. Right now, what does that mean today? Right today, already all of us, right, uh, watch a great amount of content on OTT. Now, as I was explaining to you earlier, right, the video streaming with a lot of OTT players have started mushrooming in a market like India, and we've already seen the time spent on video streaming moving up, right? The other change which you're also seeing is, of course, the rise of original content. That's what is hooking all of us to shows on, whether it's a Prime Video, whether it's on Netflix, or whether it's Voot or Disney. Clearly that seems to be happening, right? The other is live streaming on sports equally. Those are the other things which clearly are happening now. As fiber broadband increases in a market like India, right, both with Airtel and Geo, if you notice this set-top box which they're offering, they're also offering a 1 year subscription to some of these OTT channels. Now, as that happens, you will also see a fundamental shift on demand viewing completely, and watching on the go, watching when you want it, and that will even increase further from the current 3 hours 50 minutes which I was talking about to far higher, right? That makes it a difference because it allows consumers like you and me to watch ad-free content. That's the future, if you were to ask me, and that's where I think the change on the industry equally is happening.
But YouTube has already started with the, premium version of the ads content. So do you think that is something that more and more people will be looking forward? Like, are they still want to be on a subscription base where they want to pay it, or would they prefer, in the Indian context when we talk about, or would they want to stick to a freemium version, specifically when an ad-free content is being talked about?
So if you were to look at the end of the day, the content will be the king more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I say that? Is clearly we have seen even when Netflix came to a market like India, it was all paid, right? It was through a subscription model, right? Consumers decided to pay on a monthly basis. You could also buy a yearly subscription, but you pay on a monthly basis, right? Prime Video decided to package it as for Prime members and give it, free for a year.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, if you were to look at Disney, Woot, and stuff, a lot of these are also paid ones. I mean, clearly you're seeing that. Not only on this, if you were to move into, for example, music streaming, even there you're finding, if you really want to enjoy ad free content, people are willing to pay for ad free content.
Yeah.
So really it's about the content. So if YouTube Premium has great content, consumers will subscribe to it and look at it. And ultimately it's about pay per use, right? It's the innovative ways these people are bundling it, either
Mm-hmm.
with the broadband providers or allowing users to pay on a monthly basis rather than forcing them to buy yearly subscriptions. I think so. Content is going to be the key at the end of the day. That will determine the way forward.
And there's, as they all say, that content is the king. So I think that's what is being reflected here as well. So, okay, sir, now we'll move to the next segment wherein we asked our faculty members about how, industry leaders are coming to us and have a conversation with us. So, if there are any other pressing questions that need to be answered or could be answered by them for the betterment of the entire community. So, we asked our professor in the analytics area, Professor Dharun, and he has sent his question. I'll play it.
Hello, Mr. Vijay. My name is Darun. I am an assistant professor at the Digital Platform and Strategies area in MICA. I also lead the marketing analytics specialization at MICA. My area of research is basically into technology and consumer behavior and also into unstructured data analytics. My question to you is, Mr. Vijay, in regard to the future of artificial intelligence, the future of work and governance. A few months ago, GPT-3 model was launched, and this AI is something that can code in any programming language without a need for any additional training. So this was postulated that this particular AI will be able to kill coding. So if artificial intelligence can actually replace such a huge industry like software industry, what is the future of work going to look like 2 decades down the line?
Very interesting question. Thank you so much for bringing this in. Right. First and foremost, let me just put it in this way, and this is a personal view, right? First and foremost, GPT-3. It's also called as Generative Pre-trained Transformer 3. That's the full form, right? For the audience, it's actually an autoregressive language model that uses deep learning to produce human-like text. As Sir was saying, it's a third generation language prediction model, which is created by OpenAI. I mean, if somebody wanted to know, it's created by OpenAI, and the purpose there is very clearly, right, is to focus on a natural language processing systems which are pre-trained language, as I was just deciding it, right? Now, in my own view, it obviously takes the AI into different dimensions altogether, right? Where the program learns on its own, right? That I think is the best part. What is exciting is if you combine big data with machine learning, and especially natural language processing, where computers do the analysis by themselves, and in my mind they find new patterns as a result of that. Now think of it from a medical sector perspective, right, where you have lots of medical data. Imagine this being deployed in that sphere, and you're finding new patterns of medical patterns and diagnostic patterns. You would find a lot of benefit coming into the medical industry to
Yeah.
that extent, and of course to the retail industry. So there is huge benefit to that. Now the question there is, will it replace coding and will it replace other works? To a certain extent, yes, but I would try and put it in a different way, right? Ultimately, it's not so much about coding, and I will talk about big data and I'm talking about analytics, right? And it's been, you raised the point that data is the new oil, right?
Yes, sir.
I'm just adding this to that context, saying that hey, if data is the new oil, then I would say analytics
Mm-hmm.
and data science guys are the refinery that process this big data to various meaningful smart data for meaningful applications and apps. See, much like the traditional refinery that processes crude oil to various grades of oil from petrol to jet fuel, I would say analytics on big data will continue to fuel various applications and needs.
Hmm.
And I was talking to you how it moves the continuum from descriptive to diagnostics. What happened, why did it happen? Now the GPT-3 actually will move it to predictive and prescriptive point,
Yeah.
right? What is it that will happen? And more important, helping companies understand what should I do as a result of that. And as a result of GPT-3, what will happen? What I see will happen is very clearly, it's not, as I said, it's not more about coding. It's more about very, very clearly uh, focusing back on roots of science. When I say science, which is statistics and interpretation, getting the basics right. Otherwise, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So there will be far more focus on building into the basics and more important about interpretation and understanding what those trends are saying and what can I do with it very, very differently. So the role of chief information officers and data scientists will continue to be even more stronger
Hmm.
in let's say 10 years and 20 years even from now. See, the gap between what I call as the need and the demand for data scientists and the privacy guys will increase even more with this thing. Why? Because as you're saying, while the coding may go down a little bit because of this self-learning model, as I call it, which is the GPT-3, but on the other hand,
Yeah.
because a lot of decisions will happen because it's a pre-trained language model sort of a thing, it will make analytics much faster, real time. Now, as a result of it being faster in real time, the point of the matter is in the initial period, it can also go wrong. As a result of it, you also need great minds, thinkers to also be able to evaluate that,
Hmm.
and hence the role of data scientists becomes even more powerful, and hence the need for data scientists and chief information officers increase. So that's what I would see
True.
in next 10 to 20 years as changing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for answering the question that was given to us by a faculty member. Now we have some questions for you, which were sent by some very excited students who would have personally wanted to ask this question from you. But since it's a not live platform, here the questions are. So, sir, the first question is from a student from PGP1. His name is Lavneesh Anand, and he asks, what is the next space, in your opinion, where analytics will make a big revolution?
Very interesting question. Where it will make the next revolution? In my view, we're still at a cusp, right? Um, Clearly, where it will make a revolution is in the area of medical, right? I still believe that there is far more things to be done in the area of medical research.
Okay,
That's where a lot of new analytics and new things will make a difference. And especially, while referring to the previous one, I think the GPT-3 itself, natural language will make a far more difference in
hmm.
the entire thing.
Great, sir. And sir, the next question is from Simar Kaur. She is also a student from PGP1. So, sir, she is asking, there is a lot of talk amongst the companies to go sustainable. From the analytics perspective, do you think that it is something that interests the consumers?
Uh, I would say it may or may not interest the consumers, but the role of analytics can certainly help in sustainability. So let me give you an example. Sustainability by various means. Sustainability could also mean how do you reduce wastage, right? Now, if you were to look at from an analytics standpoint, how can we help manufacturers reduce wastage? Is by clearly being able to find where the need is of a particular product and what quantities is it required, what the future needs are, and where should it be placed just in right time. If you want to do all that, you are reducing wastage to a certain extent, because all the raw materials are certainly
Mm-hmm.
utilized to that extent, right? So it's a different way of looking at sustainability. The second way is how do you use, for example, geospatial analytics, right? That's another more evolving stream of analytics,
Yeah.
clearly looking at geospatial analytics to look at areas, pin codes, wards, locations to understand where the consumer demand is, who the consumers are, what is the kind of demand which is happening in those place, and what's the kind of um, right amount of media inventory, right amount of catchment analytics, right amount of product which we can make sure it reaches. Because if you were to look at it, it's about the more analytics brings in an angle of
Hmm.
targeted focus, the lesser the wastage. Now that wastage could be lesser in terms of the media
Hmm.
inventory, which is the money is being spent on it. At this, imagine you're able to ring fence a particular area where your TG is there, and you're able to use advertising through, let's say, a Facebook or YouTube or any social media, knowing where the consumers are, what they're watching, and what I need to do. So the amount of wastage of money and thus
Hmm.
energy and everything being used is very, very different. The other sustainability area I would say is in the area of, let's say, water, or in the area of
Mhm.
electricity, right? Using all of that for smart grids, right? Understanding where the peak power consumption is required, where the power consumption is lower, linking, for example, what you call as windmills
Yeah,
to the proper electric
Hmm.
grids, you're
That's
able to
interesting.
bring in a greater amount of sustainability and reduce wastage to that extent. I think all of that can really be
Hmm.
powered through smart analytics, AI driven, very, very able to do that. I mean, clearly, if you were to look at the future is also how smart cities gets developed, and how analytics and artificial intelligence is able to help us run some of these, including the government bodies, partnering with, let's say, for example, the municipal corporations or the water bodies, or for example, the electricity grids, helping them understand where the demand is, where the peak things are, where the flow is happening, and really, really help reduce the wastage which we are having, and in a way helping us in the area of sustainability. I think that's the other way
Hmm.
of looking at sustainability, is what I would say.
that's great, sir. And that's actually a very interesting way. We've never thought it that way. So it's a very interesting perspective for the students to look at it. And so before we end this wonderful recording session we had with you, so sir, would you like to give a piece of advice for the students who would be moving into the corporate setup this year, and especially the ones who will be moving into the analytics space?
Two pieces of advice, right? First and foremost, first, be a keen observer. I mean, I'm talking from my personal experience, and hence I would want to give that, right? Be a keen observer, and if you are
Yeah,
interested in
sure.
analytics, my only recommendation is get the basics right. It's not about programming, it's not about Python and R and the platforms. It's about basics on statistics, and more important, interpretations and its application for business usage. Once you get that right,
Sure.
then you can focus on programming and R and Python or any new language that will come in, because there has to be a difference between a coder and a data scientist. That's the only thing I would leave it at. And all the best. More important, I think
Yeah,
it's
true.
in this times, I think it's an exciting journey. I think the world look towards younger generation like all of you to come into the area of analytics, making a big difference. So all the best to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for
True.
recording this
Yeah.
session with us. I'm very sure that all our listeners who are interested or not interested into the field of analytics will definitely listen to this one. And you've explained all of the concepts in such an easy way. I'm pretty sure that everybody is going to understand it with a lot of ease, much easier than what we study in the textbooks. Thank you so much, Vijay sir, for
Thank you.
taking out time for doing this with us.
Yeah.
My pleasure, Nitpreet and Piyush, and thank you for inviting me to this. And have a great weekend.
Yeah.
Thank
Same
you,
to you,
sir.
sir. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
sir.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye bye.